Welcome to the Marley Bird YouTube channel, brought to you by Red Heart Yarns. This is video 2 for the beginner garter stitch bias shawl. By this point, you should have finished all of the shawl with the exception of the final garter stitch edge bind off. And so I am going to show you how to do that today. As you take a look down here, you can see what the garter stitch edge bind off looks like. We are quite literally going to cast on stitches and keep those stitches in garter stitch, and we will cast on one extra stitch that will be used as a join between the garter stitch edge and the final edge of our shawl. The resulting edge is very flexible, and the garter stitch here will resemble the garter stitch that we maintained throughout the body of the piece with our stitch marker. I'm going to go ahead and pull in a little sample swatch here. This might look familiar because it's the continuation of what I showed you on video number 1. And here are my garter stitches right here. This is my bias section that I was shaping. If I continued on, you'd begin to start seeing stripes, but I have reached just the point of the With Love Stripes yarn, and so you'll see the different color as I'm doing my garter stitch edge bind off along these stitches. We began this particular project with just 2 stitches, and then we increased out on a couple of rows until we got to the full number of stitches we had over here. Because I want this edge to mimic this edge or to mirror it, I am going to make sure that I begin this bind off with the garter stitch edge the same way. So at this point in your project, you should be on your wrong side row. You just finished a knit row and you're on your wrong side row. You know this once again because I don't see my stitch marker over here letting me know it's the right side. Also, my stitch marker down here sectioning off those 4 stitches for the garter stitch is at the opposite end, meaning I'm on my wrong side row. I will begin by casting on 2 stitches, just as I did when we cast on for the entire project. To cast on for this, I'm going to use a cable cast on. For a cable cast on, you go between these 2 stitches, yarn around your needle. As you come back out, extend and swivel your left hand needle around and place that stitch on your left hand needle. So that's 1. Now I'll take my needle, I'll go between the new stitch and the last stitch, yarn over, come through, extend, swivel, and place that on. So now I have 2 stitches, okay? What I will do now, and I'm following along with the pattern, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to begin by increasing in that first stitch, just like we did before. And the second stitch, I'm actually going to knit 2 together with the other stitches that are over here hanging out waiting to be used. So let's go ahead and begin. I will start off by doing a knit front and a knit back. So this is going to give me my increase, so that way the start of my project here will look just like, or let's say that this way, the finishing part of my project will look the way it started. Now I want to knit 2 together. So what I want to do here is, rather than knitting 2 together in the traditional way, I want to take my right hand needle and I'm going to put my needle through the back leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together through the back leg and off. Okay, so now I have 3 stitches. I turn my work. Now that I've turned my work, I have to continue on and increase. Remember when we started, we had 3 stitches and then we increased to 5. And so that's what we're going to do here. I will begin with a knit front and back in the first stitch. So knit in the front, knit into the back and off, knit 1, and then knit front and back in the end. This is the exact same way we started, remember? And I turn my work. So now I'm back over here, and if I were to extend that out just a little bit, our beginning point looks very similar to how we began over here. What I do now is I continue on in pattern, and this is what I will continue with throughout the rest of the pattern. I will knit 4 stitches, okay? 4 of the 5 stitches that I just cast on. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, And now this last stitch that I cast on there, I am going to knit it together through the back leg with the next stitch that's remaining from the shawl. So I will knit those 2 stitches together through the back leg and off. So I'm left with 5 stitches. I turn my work and I want to maintain garter stitch and I don't want to increase anymore, right? I just want to knit these 5 stitches. I'm not going to do any more increasing because I have the number of stitches I want. You might be asking yourself, Marley, why am I casting on 5 stitches if our garter stitch section only had 4 stitches? And that is a really good question. The reason you want to do 1 stitch more than the total number of stitches you actually want is because the 1 stitch more is the stitch that's acting as your bind off. It's the join of the knit 2 together, and so you will actually see the 4 stitches in the garter stitch, and our 5th one is what is joining it to the actual shawl. So we have to have that 1 extra stitch in order to make it look correct. I'm back on this where we started, so I'm back on the side that I'm going to join, so it's the wrong side of my work. I go into the stitch, yarn over, come out, and so I do that for 4 stitches, just knitting 4 stitches. And when I get to the 5th one, you'll start to see where it is. It's really great here because I've reached a point in the With Love Stripes yarn that it's changing color. So my last stitch is a different color from the stitch of my shawl. But you can also tell because there's a gap right there. So by doing our knit 2 together through the back leg, we are actually closing that gap and at the same time joining our garter stitch edge to our shawl and binding these off. You go ahead and turn your work and knit those 5 stitches, and you continue on doing this until all of the stitches are used up. At the very end, you will bind off those stitches that we cast on. So you'll bind off those 5 stitches with a nice stretchy bind off, and your work will be complete. So let me get to the end of this little swatch here, and I'll show you how to do the bind off stitches. I've just joined the very last stitch, so I have my 5 stitches remaining, and you can see here in the light pink where the join is and how it looks really great and really close to my initial 4 garter stitch. And I am looking at the wrong side, so you can see the knit 2 together through the back leg, and if I flip it over, there is my join right here, and it just looks really good, I think. So what I want to do now is I want to make sure that my final bind off edge is nice and stretchy and looks as good as the rest of my project. So what I like to do is a slip slip knit bind off. Yes, you heard that correct, a slip slip knit bind off. I don't want to use any extra yarn because I don't want to create an extra row because this one lines up really great with the row I'm on. So what I am simply going to do is I will slip this stitch as if to knit, slip this stitch as if to knit, put my left hand needle in front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. Yes, it's that easy. I have 1 stitch remaining, so I will slip 1 as if to knit, so I have 2 stitches, and then I will put my left needle in the front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. Slip as if to knit, put my needle in the front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. Slip as if to knit, put my left hand needle in the front leg of those 2 stitches and knit them together. All I have to do now is finish off my work so I can go ahead, snip my yarn. I can either pull this through or I'm just going to go ahead and just knot this very last one just to make sure it's secure. And my final edge here looks really awesome, and it's a good complement to the garter stitch edge over here that worked into the body shaping of the bias shawl. You can see there it looks like it's just a regular V shawl when actually we worked from this corner all the way up until we had this many stitches, and then we added a nice garter stitch bind off and we'll create a really great shawl. You can see You can see the final images of this shawl after this video is complete. I'll post them at the end of the video. But you now know how to make the beginner garter stitch bias shawl. Run out, get yourself some new striping yarn from Red Heart, whether it's With Love stripes or Super Saver stripes. Either one will hold your interest and you'll get a really spectacular finished shawl. I hope you've enjoyed this project and you'll come back here for more videos about knitting or crochet right here on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. Don't forget to smash that like button, as my kids say, and hit subscribe so you're up to date whenever I have a new video released. I'll talk to you again soon. I'm Marley Bird, proud spokesperson for Red Heart Yarns. Bye!